right, welcome to stage one, vision and motivation. When we're talking about our anxiety or performance anxiety, it is so important to start with the vision and understand a person's why rather than focusing on the problem. Now, if you look at the statistics behind this, you might remember from reading the book, only 1 to 3% of people have a written personal vision. Less than 10% of people have written goals. And yet a person is 90% more likely to accomplish something when they have a written vision or goal. So there's a huge power in this principle. Well, the challenge is, how do you do it? And sometimes when life gets difficult, when challenges come up, it's so easy to get lambasted and stuck in the problem, if you will. I think we can all relate to this, right? If you've ever experienced some sort of challenge or some sort of heavy emotional burden, it can be really all-consuming, right? I mean, you've experienced this to some degree at some point in your life. And so it's very easy to get weighed down by the problem. What we're inviting you to do in stage one is, instead of getting weighed down by the problem, is to shift our focus back to the vision. In other words, where are you trying to go? What are you trying to accomplish by doing this? You might remember Julie from the book. Julie was one of John's students. Now, she was a music major. And as part of that music major, she had a senior recital that was a part of her curriculum. It was kind of like the capstone project, if you will. So in order to graduate, she had to do this senior recital. Well, it was causing her a huge amount of anxiety, and really to the point where she was debating whether to switch majors. I mean, she didn't want to go through with this senior recital. She had lost track of her vision, and she was all consumed with this problem of, I've got to do this senior recital and I'm just not prepared for it, is at least how she felt. So in the initial discussions with Julie, the question was, let's not talk about all the problems, Julie. What's your vision for originally wanting to do this? Why did you want to become a music major in the first place? And she paused. And just that question flipped her whole way of thinking, because no longer was she focused on the problem of the recital. She thought and answered, well, I want to be a music teacher. You know, I want to teach young children or teenagers how to develop their gifts. Ooh, now she's starting to connect back with her vision. Well, what's her motivation behind doing that? She wants to see a new rising generation of people develop a love for music. She has a gift and she wants to share her gift. Do you see the difference in language already in what she's starting to talk about and think about? So her reconnecting to her vision was a really powerful starting point for her, and it moved her away from the problem. So what does this mean to you and I? Well, instead of focusing on all the problems, what is your vision for what you're trying to accomplish as it relates to your anxiety? So maybe, if it's a fear of heights, what's your vision? Why are you wanting to conquer this? What's your motivator behind wanting to conquer this type of anxiety? If it's playing an instrument in front of a group of people, what was your vision in the first place for picking up that instrument, for developing that skill? What's your why? And what was the motivation for doing that? Maybe it's a sports. For example, my son played football. And there was a particular person on his team who was a great athlete. He was actually an all-state athlete. Before every game, he would actually go over to the trash bin and throw up in the trash bin. It was just part of what he did. Well, that's a form of performance anxiety. So in sitting down with him, it's not focusing on, why are you throwing up? That's the wrong starting point. It's, why are you playing football? What's your vision for football? Why are you here in the first place? And starting to go back to the driver, the reason behind why you're there. So in your workbook, if you'll open up to stage one, vision and motivation, on that very first page, you're going to see 3 columns in there. The first is going to ask you for, what is your vision? I'm going to have you pause this in just a few seconds and identify, what is your vision behind whatever it is you're trying to accomplish right now. In the back of your mind, whatever's causing you your anxiety, instead of focusing on that problem, what is your vision in relation to this particular issue that you want to do or accomplish, especially when it pertains to performance anxiety? The second question is, what is your motivation to achieve that vision? Why are you trying to do that in the first place? What's driving you? Like Julie, her vision was to become a great music teacher. What was her motivator? To help students develop and understand and learn their gift. So what's your motivation behind why you're trying to pursue the vision? And then you'll see in the third question is, what's your current attitude towards the whole thing? Are you in a negative mindset, in a positive mindset? Because once we develop our vision and then our motivation behind that, we can look at our current attitude in relation to the vision. And that puts us in a place where we can start to shift our attitude and thinking towards the vision. So right now, pause the video, and I'm going to ask you to fill out those 3 questions in your workbook. What's your vision, the motivation, and your current mindset towards your vision and motivation? Okay, hopefully as you took just a few minutes to write out your vision there, your motivation behind why you wanted to pursue that vision, and started thinking about those things, you felt a power start to flow into you. I mean, really, it's so powerful to start thinking about whatever it is in the context of the vision rather than the problem. So hopefully you felt that power start to surge in. Now, with some activities, it's certainly easier to identify a vision and goal than it is with some other activities. So every activity and situation will be slightly different. Well, the next step is now that you started to articulate what the vision looks like and identified your why or the motivation behind why you're doing that, pursuing that vision, let's see if now we can get more specific as to some goals that would be milestones towards helping you achieve that vision. So for example, in Julie's case, her vision was to become a great world-class teacher and teaching kids how to play the piano. Okay, well that's part of her vision. She found out her motivation and why, but she still has that hurdle of her senior recital in front of her, right? So she's got some things that she needs to work through. So what we're going to ask you to do is now to flip the page in your workbook, and you're going to see there where it says, what is your goal? What we're asking is, what is 1 or 2 goals that you can come up with in relation to your vision? So for example, in Julie's case, one of her goals might be to successfully complete her senior recital by May 1st. Do you see how that's a specific, measurable goal that helps her work towards her vision? Now, the second and third box are going to be, what are your internal motivators and your external motivators? Let's again take Julie as an example. External motivation might be, they're making me do it. Or the teacher says I have to have a senior recital done. Well, that's an external motivation. Or, the recital has to be done to graduate. Those are all external motivators. What's her internal motivation? An internal motivation will almost always be more powerful than external motivation. Across the board, as humans, we tend to respond so much stronger to something that we're passionate and have a fire about than because we're being told to do something. That's external motivation. So what was her internal motivation? Well, she wanted to deliver a grand performance for her family and friends. That's what was going to be a part of her senior recital. She had shifted her mindset to where she was no longer anxious or afraid of performing in front of her family and friends. So part of her internal motivation was to have a lasting, memorable, and dynamic presentation for her family. That was great. Another internal motivator was that this was the last hurdle between her graduating and becoming a teacher. So her internal motivation was to finish this last step so that she could go on to achieve her goal and pursue her vision. So it's simply important for us to understand what are the motivators behind your goal. So I'm going to ask you again in a few seconds to pause this to number 1, identify a specific measurable goal that you can actually measure towards achieving your vision. So maybe it's to do X by X date, but you don't want to use the words more or better. So this is a specific measurable goal in your path towards achieving your vision. And then identify, why are you pursuing that goal from the internal perspective? What is it in you that's driving you towards accomplishing that goal? External motivation. Maybe there's some things from the outside that are driving you towards accomplishing that goal. List those down as well. And then the last question that you'll see there, similar to your vision, is what's your current mindset and attitude towards this goal? Excited, happy, passionate, or nervous, scared, afraid? And that'll take us to the last part of stage 1, is to identify your current mindset as it relates to that goal. So again, let's pause the video, identify your goal, specific and measurable. What's your internal motivation and what's the external motivation in why you're trying to pursue that goal? All right, now that you have your vision and your goal or goals identified, you've done what only 1 to 3% of the population has done. And hopefully you felt a power and a focus and a clarity come into your life as you develop those. Well, now the question is, how do you maintain the motivation to continue to pursue that vision and the goal? Because if you can relate, how many times have we been excited or passionate or on fire about something, and then what happens 2 or 3 weeks later? It's like the motivation just seems to disappear. Well, that's why stage 1 says vision and motivation. Now you've developed the vision and the goal. Hopefully you found and connected with why you're trying to accomplish this or why you're pursuing what you're pursuing. Now how do you maintain that motivation? So if you'll flip the page, you'll have now page 1 is your vision, page 2 is your goal and the motivators. Page 3 is we're going to go back and identify the previous mindset that we call the ugly old mindset. Because it's important on this path to achieving your vision and your goals to recognize where we came from. So that top column that you'll see there asks you about your old default mindset. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but what I'd like you to do is write down some of the words associated with that old, ugly default mindset. Let's recognize where we came from. The second column there is going to ask you to identify what are some of the cues and triggers that you recognize from your past, from your experience, that will indicate a shift starting to happen in your attitude. So whether it's in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 or 6 months, in the pursuit of your vision and goals, you've got to recognize when there's that attitude shift that's trying to creep back into our lives that we've all felt at some point. So what are some cues that you're familiar with in your life that you can identify and say, you know what, I recognize that mindset trying to creep in, because then we can do something about it. So first of all, top column, you're going to write down what the old ugly mindset looked like. Let's identify where we were. And then write down what are some cues that will cue you into or help you recognize when you might be shifting back into that mindset. What are the things that tend to draw you towards that? And then lastly, in the book, there's a page in there. If you go to the actual book, page 50, or in the workbook, we'll throw a few examples in there. We're going to talk about trigger words. So some examples of trigger words from the book that you'll also find in your workbook are bold, confident, free, excited, inspirational, expressive, dynamic, sparkling, powerful, generous, flexible, and so on. So these are some examples of trigger words. And what we mean by trigger words is when you feel yourself starting to drift back into that old, ugly default mindset, you can recall 2 or 3 of these powerful trigger words that will shift you back to your vision and your goal. That's why we call them trigger words. They're triggering your vision and your goal rather than getting sucked back into the problem or all the ugly places that we have been in the past and came from. So what should you have when you finish this section? You should have a written vision. You should have a specific measurable goal or goals, 2 or 3 of them, that you can accomplish or use as milestones on your way to achieving that vision. You should be able to identify what your old ugly mindset looked like. What are some cues that would pull you towards that? And instead, once you feel those cues starting to come up, what are some trigger words that you can use to remind you of your vision and your goals? So really what we're looking for is vision, goals, and trigger words. And that's how you stay motivated and focused, is constantly going back to your vision, your goals. And if you ever feel that pull of the old mindset creeping in, go back to the trigger words that will bring us back to the vision so that we're not focused on the problem. The other thing that will help you in this process is once you finish your vision and goals, print these out and put them in a place where you will see them often. Maybe you've heard people talk about vision boards or things like that. There's a reason that keeping something in front of our eyes is so powerful. It's that focus. That's why when you have written goals, you're 90% more likely to accomplish them. So maybe consider putting these on your bathroom mirror or in your planner or on your desk, on your laptop, computer. The whole idea is, how do you keep these in front of you so that you maintain that motivation? So right now we're going to finish this section. What's your vision? What are your goals? And then on this third page, what's the old ugly mindset look like? What are some cues that you might recognize from past experience that will try and suck you back into that? And then what are 3 or 4 trigger words that you can use that take you back to the vision, your motivation, that power that comes with the vision and the goals? And before we wrap up, I'll just share a personal example of this. You know, as a fighter pilot, I had all kinds of incredible experiences. And if you've ever seen Top Gun, you know, Maverick and Goose and all these guys walking around, it's a cool thing. But that's not how it always is. And to get there is this long, arduous, tough journey. So I remember way back when I was just starting in pilot training, I remember thinking to myself, man, Rob, are you really good enough to hang with these other guys in here? Can you really do that? That's the old ugly default mindset right there. Later in the book, you'll read about this if you haven't read the book already. We call that the monkey chatter. So there's the monkey chatter already creeping in, the old mindset. Rob, are you good enough? Do you really belong here? Can you make it? Those are not helpful questions in any way. So what did I do? What's the vision? Why am I here in the first place? Become a fighter pilot and serve my country and have some incredible experiences. Okay, part of the vision. Well, what are some of my goals? And so I outlined at the beginning of pilot training some of my goals for pilot training that were specifically in my control. And I developed a form of trigger words, and the power in that is that every week I was looking at my vision and goals. And it wasn't an accident. I felt that monkey chatter And I heard that monkey chatter almost daily and weekly, but I replaced it with what my focus was, the trigger words, the positive environment that I was trying to create around myself, and some of what we'll get to in later chapters. The point was, at the end of pilot training, I was fortunate and blessed to graduate #1 in my entire class. Well, remember where I started from. Robert, are you even good enough to be here with these guys? And so sometimes that monkey chatter, that negative self-talk can be really powerful, and simply shifting to the vision and the goals of what we can control becomes such a powerful starting point, just like it did for me in pilot training, and just like it did for Julie, who went through and had a great recital to finish off her collegiate career and went on to become an amazing music teacher. It was this shift to her vision and focusing on what she could control as milestones and getting rid of that old mindset that helped her shift her thinking. So let's finish this section. Make sure that you've got a vision and goals that motivate you and give you an exciting place to start.